Let's see. Good morning, everybody. I hope to go short. I might have to do like a disclaimer in the beginning for like my young Christian friends that are on these posts that do like to watch. I might be mad on this, so don't watch anymore. Because all of the young Christians, I want to. Oh, there's just. I'm doing some work right now, and it's a Saturday morning, and I spent a lot of time. Before I forget, this was one thing. Sometimes I write like notes. I don't have them here. Oh, maybe I do, but I wanted to. This is one I wanted to share. On the Mondays and Fridays, I have an intercession prayer time that I do, and I developed over time. I have different types of prayer times. But about a week ago, when you're in school, I'm going to talk about fire department a little bit too. But like, I remember when we were kids in school or adults or whatever, I used to wake up sometimes or I have a dream like, oh, I got to go to school, I got to take a test or whatever. And then I'd wake up and think, oh, it's like a Saturday and oh, I don't have to go. Even after I retired from the fire department, there were times, my wife told me once, like in a dream, I was putting out a fire or whatever it was, pull the hoses or something. And so I had a dream about a week or so ago, and in the dream, I was in my prayer time, in the yard doing it. And when you pray and develop a prayer time, and you pray for nations and places, and when you're in that moment, you see yourself there. And so in the dream, I was praying this and this, and I was going through my discipline. And then I woke up and I said, sort of like that school thing, like I said, oh, I said, I didn't pray it yet. But in the dream, I was praying it, okay? So I said, oh no, it's Friday or it's Monday. I have to do that one today. And so I did it, my prayer time. And then I guess it was yesterday, which is Friday, I do worship in the morning, then I do that intercession. But then I had a few things to do. And whenever I skip that prayer time, I know, oh, I should not have skipped it because it's important to do that. And you pray for your friends, you pray for the outreach that you're doing. But yesterday, right at the end of my worship time, which is quite long, I said, now I'm going to do the intercession, then I'm going to do the next thing, and I'm going to write and whatever. And I felt right before I prayed, God said, cash in on that dream. But this was, I felt God saying, no, no, that morning you had the dream. I count that. Though it was in a dream, I count that. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. I skipped the intercession because I cashed in on the dream intercession. And it felt normal. Like, normally if I don't do it, I know, oh, I don't feel well. But so every word of God is pure. This thing that we are involved in our lives is listening to God. Oh, I didn't check the news this morning. I'm uploading the video for the post tomorrow, which is Sunday sermon, which I wrote the notes and all, made it last Sunday. I read the Colder Times yesterday, and I'm glad I didn't check the news. I don't know what's the news today, what it is yet. And we have a judge here in our community called Judge Guy Williams, and I've talked a little bit about politics and local issues. And he's facing two felony counts of basically someone claimed that he ran. Maybe he has a history of road rage, and then he pulled a gun out, and so he was going to rerun for his judge position, but then he decided not to. And the case is now going to go to trial. But it's serious because there are two felony counts. And so yesterday what the Colder Times had done was like an expose of maybe what his history was. And they showed a lot of things. It was, some of it, it's not funny, but it was kind of like laughed a little. He had made statements to people that someone once said they weren't going to vote for him, and he challenged them to a cage match. And then he told somebody else, I'll meet you in the dojo. I used to do a little of the karate when I was a kid. I liked the boxing more, but at one time I did the karate. And So he was kind of told people, "You're not going to vote for me. I'll fight you right now." And so there was some problems, I guess, and I just thought, this is South Texas. My advice to Judge Williams, now this is a joke, would be he's not running again for judge, but I'd use all that. I would actually fight this case and then run again for judge and put it right on your commercial. I'm Judge Williams. I'm asking for your vote. And if you don't vote for me, I'll meet you in the dojo, and he'll probably there'd be, maybe a few hundred people that just out of fear would vote for the judge. Okay. One of the things, I had a friend once, this was years ago, and this friend has never worked. And it's no one you've ever seen on video, okay? And he's been on disability his whole life for various reasons, and I have friends in that position. Now, I'm going to have to bring up the fire department thing again, because for some strange reason, people think that, like, either I did not do that, and I've had people question. I had a neighbor years ago that told my kids were friends with their kids, and they were nice little kids. And I remember once, and I'd go to work, the fire department, come home, and they told their kids, he doesn't fight fires, he's like an office thinger. And let me say, when I joined the fire department in 1983, I got hired. And I was young, 20-something. At that fire department in Kingsville, like others, which was different than the one my father retired from in New Jersey, but we had what's called ambulance and fire trucks, and you had EMTs. So I was an EMT for 25 years. A few years I had dropped down to an ECA, then we had to be required to be EMTs, but it was fine. But being on the ambulance, which I did do, but that was not my main job. Because I promoted. I was the youngest firefighter to promote, to get off of the ambulance and to basically stick with firefighting. So I thought, the first promote, because I realized, we've got ambulance runs, we'll go down, and ambulance is fine, but that's not what I wanted to do. So I was the youngest firefighter to promote to what was called engineer or driver. But you still fought fires. As a matter of fact, you got out of the ambulance. That was the motivation for that. And then you became strictly driver engineer. Of course, you drive the fire trucks. And there was questions because I was young, and you had to be there 2 years before you could even go for that. And I had friends of mine that were there their whole careers. And they're good guys, and some people, a lot of the promotions are just how high you score on tests, okay? So gratefully, I promoted right after my 2 years passed. I was still very young. I got driver. And there was questions, John's real young, and he's not been here that long. But I was long enough to promote, and so I got that position. So my job was really in the fire service, even a lot more so than a lot of other guys that do their whole time. Because they would require, if they never promoted, they became paramedics, which was okay. But still, they were doing more ambulance, a lot of those guys. So I was really more firefighter. And the reason I got to mention that, I had a friend, like I said, this is years ago. And after I retired, 25 years, I remember one day he said, well, it must be nice to not have to work. From a person who never worked and had disability his entire life. And he just made the statement like, you're lazy, John. Just because you worked 25 years at that particular type of a job, you're not carrying your weight. Now, those criticisms from people who never worked, I just avoid that. And then I've had other multiple people over time say and ask me, so you didn't fight fires? Well, yes, actually, I did fight a lot of fires. Well, you go into the house when it's on fire, you put on your Scott pack, you take your fire hose, and then I stayed in that particular position which was like I just explained, and I never took the captain promotion. I purposefully passed that up. I didn't think it was worth it. It was the next rank. You'd go up to captain, but then you're not doing really more of the firefighting from the position I held, which was called engineer driver, which was firefighter as well, okay? That was the main, so many house fires I've been in, okay? And it's not a big thing. It's a job you do. And so maybe recently, so once again, somebody said, so did you? I said, look, it's a job. Many people have done that job for many years. Okay, it was a job. It was a job. I went into many fires. And people that have never worked their whole lives, that till this very day, still, so what you do over time, you just avoid. Saying, I'm tired. Okay, I'll go help. So that just plays on me. Now, that's why I'm not that mad, but just got tired of that after a while. At the end of our, all the years of the fire department, you never had, like, numbers. Meaning, are you number 100 or 2? We didn't have that. But the last few years, right before I retired, one of the guys at the firehouse, they said, we're going to order, you could get the old leather fire helmets, which we never had. My father had one. He was looking for it a few years ago at the old house in New Jersey. He's like, I think it's in the attic, and my father has some, like, the mental, he's losing some memory. But we didn't have those classic fireman helmets, which were made out of leather. But one of the guys at the firehouse, they ordered I have it in the car, I could show it to you, but they ordered little leather, nice, they're probably $50 each maybe, but they were just leather emblems you put on your helmet, and it has your name, and then it has a number. But because at that point they were going to put that things, and they were nice. But I got that like the last year before I retired. And of course, we didn't go by numbers. Okay, that was just kind of for the helmets, which were nice. So, but I keep that in my car. I also bought an EMT badge. I had some nice fireman badges, nice ones, that when I retired, you keep them. When I was in Switzerland, I had that one with me many years ago, and I was at a little like halfway house. And I showed the badge to some of the guys that I said, oh, here's this badge. And I gave a couple of them away just to friends. And that one kid there in Switzerland, I said, I'd give it to you, but I had another one. I gave that one to somebody else. These are just some badges that I actually got when I was at the fire department. So he kept it. But I have my one badge in my wallet. But then I thought, I want to put some in my car. Just problems over the years. So I bought like an EMT badge. You can buy the badges at a store here in town. I officially, and so people question, well, why do you have an EMT badge in your car? What number were you? So, well, I didn't have a number. But then I remembered, I said, well, I think I got a little emblem. But I'm tired of the questions. I'm tired of the questions, okay? I'm done with that. It was a wonderful thing, that job. I'm so grateful. I'm tired of those. I'm tired of those questions. Little kids coming up to me, years ago. My mommy told you you're lying. Well, no, actually, son, I did go in that many house fires. Okay, this is the badge. She's just tired of it. I see the media that way. They want to scrutinize many things. Our wonderful community. And people say we're voices. I think you should be looked into for all of the things you have done, media. We should look into, I remember Joe Scarborough. He used to be a Republican congressman. And he was at MSNBC, which the headquarters is where I walk. Used to be in Fort Lee, New Jersey, right by the George Washington Bridge for the uninformed media of this world. Then they moved their headquarters to Secaucus, New Jersey, where my grandfather used to live, who passed away, Vito Saletti. So that's kind of, and I remember Scarborough and others on the media seen these things. We're going to put you in prison, Trump, your family, your kids. And then I remember Trump tweeted something. Now, that's how he is. But he said, what about the investigation of the girl you possibly raped and murdered, who died? Now, I wasn't familiar with that story. But what happened was Joe Scarborough retired from Congress. And it was a few months before he retired that there was a woman that worked for him in his office, okay, the congressional office. And they found her dead under Mr. Scarborough's desk. I wasn't familiar with this. And they found her alone, dead from a head injury. Alone in Mr. Scarborough's office. And they concluded that she accidentally fell down, hit her head, and died by herself. Now her family questions that, rightfully. Supposedly, Joe Scarborough said he was not there at the time, whatever that was. But you know how Trump is, so he tweeted that. And then I looked at a few links. This came out like a few months ago. And then if you went, they had an old YouTube scroll where Mr. Scarborough, Joe Scarborough, media, was on the Don Imus show. Now, Don Imus, from where I grew up in the New York City area, he was like the local talk guy. And I like Don Imus. I have not heard him in years. Very famous, had a lot of political people on. Does good work. He does a charity thing for kids. And he had cancer a few years ago. I'm assuming Don Imus is still alive, unless he passed away. But Joe Scarborough was on the show. And Joe Scarborough made this statement about that girl who they found dead in his office. He made this statement. Oh, you mean the girl I had sex with and killed her? Now, I'm sure Mr. Scarborough was kidding. First of all, whether you were kidding or not, that woman's family is still questions about that. Because she was a runner, she was a very healthy girl, and then somehow she accidentally fell in his room by herself, died from a head injury under an office. That's questionable. But then on the YouTube scroll from years back, it even had various people, Robert Redford, the famous actor. Even on the scroll, you could see it said, "Where's the sound?" They deleted the voice later on. Now, more than likely, he was joking, which he shouldn't have joked about. And more than likely, but this is the same type of a man in the media who said on MSNBC, we're going to put you and we're going after your family. You call that media coverage. You call that media coverage. I think all the media should also be questioned. I'm sure they looked into is this guy really a firefighter? You should be questioned about what are you? How much money do you make? Say that's none of your business. I believe just like you have scrutinized Christians and churches and organizations, I make zero money and I take nothing. And I believe you should not be a voice to this community because you do it for money. You do it for a salary. You say, oh, you're just being critical. Even Democracy Now!, one of the most liberal news people you'll ever see, which I watch, Amy Goodman, when they did a little promo the last few weeks and said, please support our news organization called Democracy Now!, it says, because we're not run by the corporate organizations. We're not run by all the ads and everything else. So even other liberal news people criticize regular media people because what that liberal woman said, who does her own news, she said, you are run by corporations, by ads, and by finances. And the same critique that you would give to some church, some ministry, and some organization because they're taking money, I give to you. Why you would have articles 1 week, opinion pieces that say voter fraud does not exist. And the reason they said that is because Mr. Trump said there's some voter fraud. And you came out and said, you even did an opinion piece a few weeks ago and said, we will stand for these things. And one of the things they said they're going to stand for is to fight back against the false narrative that there is something called voter fraud. And then the next week, with the article I saw, they had to admit you had rampant voter fraud, purchasing people, getting people to sign ballots, and then they're going to sell them to an ex-cop who's running, they said $1,000, and then you had to run an article. What kind of two-faced, double-tongued reporting is that? I guess you did it because you did it for money. Because according to Amy Goodman, you're run by the corporations. According to Amy Goodman, you yourselves are doing it for cash, for salaries, and to please political constituencies, and so you lie to the public. That's what that woman said, and she's a liberal. And I could go into some of the other. There was a recent release. Congress has been requesting certain things as we look at, and I'll tell you, this Mueller investigation. I understand both sides of the issue. And you had these people, Rosenstein and Andy McCarthy and Strux, and you had these little conversations they had back and forth. And some of that's coming public. And what they want to look at is whether some of these people who had very close ties to the Democrats and everything else, whether they crossed the line and committed felonies in doing collusion things themselves. And so something Congress wanted to see memos of these people, whether they're talking back and forth, which some already came out, where these people investigating said things like, we must take this guy out of office. If he dares get elected, we must remove him. And there were some memos that these same people that are investigating Trump, that are supposed to be non-biased, there are things like that that have already come out. We've got to put the plan in place in case he... And these are the same people working hand in hand. And so finally, Congress requested, wait, we need to look at some of this. We need to see if you guys are above board here. The abuse of the Justice Department under Mr. Obama, going after reporters, tapping in. Those things in the media overlooked all of that. They're a sham and they're a scam and they're fake news. Books written on that. And so finally, just the last few days, what Congress wanted was, we want to see some of these conversations the Mueller people are having. Are they actually legal, besides the fact that they're sleeping around with people in the office, which according to scripture is a bunch of adultery. And you're sleeping around, screwing this one, screwing that one. The same people, Strokes and his mistress, and you guys are working in that, with all the sexual harassment things. You said, well, maybe it was voluntary. You shouldn't have none of that going on, claiming to be some righteous voice. Mr. Comey keeps speaking about righteous voice he is. Just the leaking of the personal notes that he leaked to the New York Times, which he admitted is a crime. You're not a voice of justice, sir. You've taken your political views and then claimed that somehow you're a voice of righteousness. You're like everybody else. And so one of the memos that Congress finally read the last few days, and remember this, every Democrat that is on these committees looking at this are trying to hide it. They're not for truth. They're not for, we want to find out about collusion. They're not out for that, because they try to hide a recent memo that was released. And I heard 2 Congress people the last few days say, this is a bombshell. It's a bombshell about criminal activity amongst these people that are investigating Trump. And they also said the Democrats on this particular committee did all they could to prevent any light being shined on any criminality or corruption by their own people. And that's why it's a sham and a disgrace when you do these articles. Anybody that would have read that newspaper after coming out with opinion and opinion and opinion that there's no such thing as voter fraud. It's a scam and we will fight to prove this is one of our great noble values. And then 2 days later, a week later, rampant voter fraud. Unstoppable. Ballots selling, cops admitting people are trying. What a disgrace. You're doing it for money. All of you media figures are getting way too much money. And that's the only reason I could think that you would lie to the public, or you would try to cover up things that you say you're there to expose. It's the only reason you'd cover up for corrupt judges that are doing drug deals. Because you're a sham. You're no voice of righteousness. And right now, this week, the same Dianne Feinstein and those Democratic senators who were willing to leak things, they have a certain memo that is showing criminality and corruption by these same people that are in it, and they're doing all they can to prevent you from seeing it. And even when the news media, there are multiple ones that we have already been documented. Abuses of power by the Obama administration, Mr. Holder, and even Mrs. Lynch, attorney generals. There were multiple documented books written how they use the Justice Department to go after people, citizens, illegally tapping things. And I'll tell you, that was a scandal, that was a crime, and the media were mum on it because they are not serving any useful service to the public. And you could just see it. So you are not trustworthy. Anything that you say on NBC, ABC, CBS, you're not trustworthy. Because the critique is this: you're doing it for money. Because you're getting paid and you have advertisers, and many of them have political views. So you're an untrustworthy source. And the only media you should ever listen to are the ones that are doing it free, just to communicate truth to you. Because every other one of them have that bias in them. And so remember that. A memo came out this last week that would show corruption within this team. Statements back and forth. If you have people investigating people in a society, and you have those same investigators making statements that we're going to do anything we can to take a certain person down, before that guy even got elected. That's what those statements they made. They said, and if perchance Trump gets elected, then we got to put Andy's plan in place, more than likely Andy McCartney and Rosenstein and these guys. So they were discussing among themselves, working also with the Clinton people, on if Mr. Trump gets elected, then we must put some plan in place, which you're probably looking at it now. And these were open. And the media would want to hide every part of that they would want to hide from you. The same thing how the DACA thing, as far as I know, the government shut down at midnight. Supposedly, I didn't check the news yet. And we watched the DACA thing. And the huge mistake that even the Democrats who claim for the DACA kids, I explained, I'm not going to explain again. You had a choice to give them something real. Not some scam thing, not some temporary thing. They didn't care. To them, the DACA, which is like me telling you, I could give you a temporary license. You got to renew it every 6 months. It's not really official. It's not really legal, but it's just based on my permission. I'm going to do it for you. Or I could pass a law that you could be legal and have a license. Which one would you want? Dependent upon me, on an executive order I made, or something that was finalized in law? Of course you'd want something in law. And many of these Democrats claiming to represent the DACA kids, that's what DACA is. It was a temporary thing that could have been undone by anybody. It was not sure. And you got Democrats saying, we want that. We don't really want the law that would make it legal for these kids to really be here. Even the damn media does that here. DACA, temporary permit. that you got to get permission from me every so often if you want to stay, or we could give you a law. And because they're so blind, they're so blind. All right, we'll end it with that.